Fantastic. Oh, and I think mine is also recording at the same time. Okay. Anywho, hello everyone. Welcome to a special edition of both a special edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. But it's not just 1+1; it's a crossover with Orinoco Tribune, which is your place for Latin American news and international affairs, always from a critical leftist perspective, Chavismo perspective and whatnots. And so joining me today is Saheli Chowdhury, who's part of the editorial team of Orinoco Tribune, and the editor-in-chief, Jesus Rodriguez Espinoza. And before we get into the issues, it's also been a very special week for Orinoco Tribune because it's their five-year anniversary. So, guys, before we get into the topic, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and happy birthday.
Thank you, Compass. Thank you, Youri.
Yes, it's a real honor to have you. Yes, it's a real honor to have you both. And just before we get to the issues I wanted to talk to you about, let's talk about briefly, if it's even possible, what's currently happening right now in Venezuela, because yes, how is the country dealing with still ongoing sanctions? And I know there's lots of we don't have to another program we're going to talk about the situation with with the ruling left-wing government and the Communist Party of Venezuela. I don't want to talk about that today, but I would like to talk about just how is Venezuela dealing with the still economic warfare that's going on, as well as I believe there are upcoming elections going on. So let's talk about those two things. Then there's another Venezuelan topic, and then we'll talk about some of the other countries that's in Latin America.
It's fine. Basically, Venezuela has been recovering economically, talking slowly but steady since 2021, 2021, I believe, but we are still in trouble. I mean, we are still sanctioned. The U.S. has been selectively lifting or easing some sanctions. It's not the right term. It's not lifting. It's easing some sanctions temporarily in the same attempt to try to blackmail Venezuela to do whatever they want. And we never will do that. And that's why many analysts here believe that those recent decisions of OFAC might soon go back to where they were a few months ago. So, but anyway, besides that, the economy has been recovering, but we are still facing terrible conditions. I mean, and we have a humongous problem of salaries of workers in Venezuela. And the salaries are not low because the government want them to be low, but because the economic conditions are not are just a shadow of what they were like 5 or 6 years ago. So in that sense, you have, I mean, whenever I say that things are getting better, I'm always scared that people abroad might misunderstood that everything is like color de rosas, we say here in Venezuela. Rose color, I don't know how to translate that in English, but perfect.
I think the expression
everything is rosy, yes, but yeah.
Yes, rose-colored glasses or rose-tinted glasses. I believe that's
Maybe.
how. That's at least the English expression.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask. It's funny because now that I'm thinking about it, Venezuela is still surrounded by a lot of hostile neighbors. So because
not that many. Guyana
it
might
used to
be
be
one
like,
of them. Yes,
Chile, for example, is hostile towards Venezuela. Argentina
It's
now under this current far right dingbat is going to definitely set the clock back on
that's true.
détente with
But
Venezuela.
we don't see them like neighbors, but they are close, of course. But
Yeah,
when you mentioned neighbors, I was
They do
thinking
share
about
frontiers. Yeah, they do share.
Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana that are direct neighbors. But they are in the neighborhood. It's true, and it's true that Argentina Milei's election is terrible.
And we're definitely going to talk about Argentina, but how much does the current leftist government in Colombia, as well as Lula in Brazil, how much of that helps to alleviate some of the suffering of Venezuela? The fact that
very, very importantly, especially in the case of Colombia. Because Brazil is a neighbor, but disregarding that is a neighbor, is a kind of sort of distant neighbor because we are separated by the Amazon jungle. But it's absolutely better than have Bolsonaro there. But in economic terms, as well as in political terms, the most important, change was the election of President Petro in Colombia, and also because he has been taking very serious leftist, socialist positions that I admire and that surprised me because before of the elections I was not so very optimistic about him. I'm not saying that he is a Marxist-Leninist. I don't think he is, but he has been taking decisions that have surprised me. So I'm happy because of that. And economically talking, the level of economic exchange between Venezuela and Colombia is extremely important. I mean, before we began the economic crisis, maybe back in 2014 or 15, the economic exchange between Venezuela and Colombia was beyond the tens of billions of dollars. So it's not a small economic exchange that we have there. And President Petro is pushing for that exchange to go back to normal. Not only because I believe that he is a Bolivarian, a person that really believes in the concept of Patria Grande, which is something that is also very Chavista, but also because the improvement in the commercial trade relations with Venezuela also will help a lot Colombia that is also not in very good economic shape. So in that sense, in geopolitical sense that you mentioned, Venezuela is way better than 2 or 3 years ago when we had the Lima Group, for example. And in that Lima Group was this group created by the U.S. By Canada, but under directions of the U.S. To try to diplomatically isolate and attack Venezuela. So in that sense, we are also we have less pressure. Chavismo have less regional pressure as we had before. But of course, Milei is not a good, outcome in recent elections. What was the other one that you were mentioning? Chile.
Boris, yeah.
Yes, Boris is a liberal that he believes that is socialist, but in reality, I believe that he is not even liberal. So, but anyway, I mean, he tries, but he a few days ago announced that he was going to expel thousands of migrants. Most of them are Venezuelans that are still there. Many, Venezuelan migrants in South America have decided to come back to Venezuela or to move to the U.S. But there are many that are still there, and they, because of the xenophobia that has been rising like crazy in many countries of South America against Venezuelan migrants, they have announced that they are going to resume those expulsions of migrants that they have been doing in recent years several times. This is not new. anyway. So I mean, Guyana from the other side is a more complex situation, but maybe you have another question about that later. But in general terms, the economic situation is getting better. People is optimistic. The easing of sanctions give you some, space, air to breathe more freely. Even though we always in Venezuela think that it might, end soon. But anyway, I mean, the government is trying to take advantage of that situation to improve the economic conditions of all of us here in Venezuela and people itself. In that sense, the inflation has been moving very good recently, especially because the exchange rate, I mean, the price of the dollar in comparison with the Bolivar has been keeping steady. Yes, exactly from the moment when the US government announced the easing of sanctions. So we has been like that like for 2 months with the almost stable exchange rate between the Bolivar and the dollar, which is something very unusual in recent years in Venezuela. So I'm optimistic because of that, but you never know. I mean, we have seen before situations like that, not that long like this one that we have been seeing today, but then something happened and the exchange rate go crazy and we go back to the, hyperinflation or the inflation spiral. But I hope that that doesn't happen anyway.
That's how an important follow-up question on that before we switch gears and talk about other Latin American countries is how much does the Belt and Road Initiative, which I believe Venezuela is a member of, and just in general the rise of BRICS, although some of those in BRICS are still want to be hostile towards Venezuela, but at least Russia, China, and South Africa,
Brazil.
still wants to, they're not following along with the, with the Western economic terrorism inflicted on Venezuela. So how much does the Belt and Road Initiative and BRICS, who I think who at least rhetorically we hear that they want Venezuela to be part of it and they want to bypass dollarism. So how much of that is helping in in Venezuela's recovery, even though Venezuela is still under Western economic sanctions, terrorism?
Okay, I wanted to add before we go into BRICS. I'll just talk about BRICS and say that none in the BRICS is actually against Venezuela. No, I mean, at least the original partners, nobody is against Venezuela. Nobody has any sanctions or anything against Venezuela. Not even India. No, actually, Venezuela has
that's true.
Venezuela has some treaties regarding. Well, I'll come to India. Venezuela has some treaties regarding like production of medicine and stuff with India. So it's not very big. The exchange used to be larger prior to 2019. So in 2019, the sanctions on PDVSA, and at the same time, there are the sanctions on Rosneft of Russia. Now in India, these two companies actually collaborated with 2-3 Indian petroleum companies. So what happened is in 2019, when there are these total sanctions on these, I mean, PDVSA was already sanctioned, but by 2019, Venezuela was having the total blockade imposed by the Trump administration. And he was also imposing sanctions on Russia, which is not mentioned. It is said that he was a Russian agent, but he wasn't. If he were, he would not have imposed sanctions on Russia. So he had imposed the sanctions on the Russian oil industry. So it meant that, these sources, the sources of oil from Venezuela and Russia, in fact, it was Venezuelan oil coming through Russia to India, that was actually blocked off. So that has not yet been recovered. Okay. So that is not even taking place now, even with the lifting of 5 sanctions by the US. I mean, not even lifting, I think easing, because they said that anyone within those 5 areas, so these are like minerals and oil. So oil and mining sectors, anyone in those, any actor, either state actor or private actor, who has any dealings with Russia, they will be within the sanctions. They will not be exempted. So that means it is
Yes.
not even a lifting; it's an easing of sanctions and
What Sahil is trying to say is that those easing have a special clause there
conditions. Yeah,
that forbids any Russian entity to take advantage of the easing of the sanctions. You know
and
what I
which is
mean? The
actually
wording of the easing of the sanction of the OFAC whatever resolution license is the name. Precisely excludes Russia from taking advantage of it. Those
Yes.
guys never, and in the contrary, they gave preferential treatment for U.S. oil
Yes, U.S. companies.
corporations.
Yeah, because it was the
They,
U.S.
they,
oil
they never lose.
corporations. U.S. oil
That's free
corporations.
trade.
U.S. oil corporations were the one.
You can't make this shit
We
up.
can say that.
The dark farsancy of this.
Capitalism.
So it was the US oil
Yes.
corporations that were originally pushing for this easing of sanctions. They wanted their Venezuelan trade back because they were losing out. There is already like the crisis, energy crisis
Course,
in the
yes.
global oil market, thanks to the fighting with Russia. So there are more than 8,000 sanctions on Russia. Just imagine. Okay. So in this situation, its oil industry is totally sanctioned. So of course, it's in the global market, but not directly as Russian oil. So in this situation, Europe has a crisis because it is servile to the US and it cannot get any oil from Russia. So it is buying like oil at 4 times the price from the US, their masters. US does not give them any any advantage. So at the same time, the US also wants the oil. So that's it. Like it's just
In
Chevron
Europe.
and other companies actually pushed for the easing of these sanctions so that they had some advantage. Of course, if they think that they can exclude Russia, it's impossible because the Russian oil industry is very well related to the Venezuelan oil industry and its development, at least from the 2000s. And, Rosneft used to have shares in PDVSA and all. I don't think they have it anymore, but still. I mean, I don't know. I think these things are not said openly these days. Okay. So as for BRICS, I don't know how much trade with BRICS countries is happening. I would have to probably look. The biggest trade volume is probably with Russia, as far as Venezuela is concerned. It may also be with Brazil and China. I don't know about India and
yes.
South Africa.
China,
Brazil is,
most
I think,
importantly,
China,
I
I
believe.
think. Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, I think that is it. China and Russia must be the biggest economic partners. And Brazil is, of course, a big economy in the world. So that would be a relation. Apart from that, with South Africa and India, the trade volume is much smaller, but none of them are politically or economically against Venezuela. None of them has any sanction or anything against Venezuela. They all have like good diplomatic and trade relations with Venezuela. So I don't know the direct impact of BRICS. And there are many economic things that are not spelled out because of sanctions. So like if it is known, it will be sanctions because US sanctions have these third-party clauses that if something does not belong to the US, a company that does not belong to the US and does not belong to Venezuela, but to a third country, and it has some trade relations with Venezuela or even sells something to Venezuela, then that country will be sanctioned. That company,
entity,
be it private, be it state, be it a person, they will be sanctioned by US. So in this situation, to protect these entities, Venezuela has an anti-blockade law, and one of its clauses is secrecy, which also gives more probably space for corruption, definitely. But I think that's an unfortunate corollary, collateral damage coming from the sanctions. So sanctions, yes, it's sanctions that actually encourage corruption in any blockaded country.
And China and Venezuela, just to add something to that to your question and to what Sahili said, have had a very important economic, financial, and of course diplomatic relations in recent years. But that relation has been shrinking because of the sanctions. And many analysts, yes,
it's been weakening, you say,
especially the economic one, because Chinese entities, companies cannot do business as much as they want with a country that is sanctioned as Venezuela. But I read recently that, and there's a lot of right-wing, analysts say that it was because Venezuela had a big debt with China, and that China didn't want to, provide more financial aid to Venezuela. But I recently read that Venezuela has been paying China, even in these recent years, most of the debt that we had with it, with oil, of course, and our debt relation with China is not what you might read in Bloomberg or in Financial Times or those good
Economist, yeah.
unbiased outlets. So many people are expecting like a resuming of better financial cooperation with China. Not talking about the Belt and Road, but you don't see big, gigantic projects like you might see in other countries in the region. For example, I recently see in Salvador that the Chinese government opened a gigantic library
And the
in the
stadium.
capital city. Yes, and it's an amazing infrastructure. And that's part of the Belt and Road. We don't see those humongous projects as we see them like 10 years ago here in Venezuela. But many people are talking that cooperation between China and Venezuela will resume soon. I hope so.
I'll just add about the El Salvador one. It was actually signed by the FMLN government before. So it started during Sanchez Seren's time. And
I
it
didn't
is
know
just
that.
completed.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when it was more of a leftist government, FMLN was there. So at that time, all the economic cooperation that El Salvador has with China was signed at the time of Sanchez Seren, who shifted recognition from Taiwan to China. So, and then they had all these big infrastructures. So all those started at that time. And now they're being completed because infrastructure takes time. Now that they are being completed, it is Nayib Bukele taking the credit. But they were actually signed before. So if someone says, "Oh, it's a right winger and China is cooperating with a right winger," well, China actually cooperates with everyone. It's a soft power thing also, and it does not try to do regime change.
They actually respect sovereignty.
It actually respects sovereignty, unlike the US. But yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Fine. Okay. We promise this will be the final question about Venezuela before we talk about what everybody wants to talk about, which is Argentina. But I have to ask this question though about Venezuela because you mentioned Saheli El Salvador, which I believe they changed their their currency to cryptocurrency in Bitcoin. So I have to ask this question: what do you say to some on the left? It's not a bunch of voices saying this, but there are some voices on the left who say that, well, what Jesus just said about China and Venezuela, that shows you the limitations of multipolarity and the Belt and Road Initiative. Ergo, why don't we embrace cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and Venezuela should embrace cryptocurrency and Bitcoin as a way to get out of
and
the effects of free markets, of dollarism, or in terms of the British poundism, or but all of those. Yeah. So
colonial
currency. So what would you say to that?
Okay, so I'll firstly say that cryptocurrency is also within the, well, it's not outside capitalism, firstly. Okay, and that's a joke. I mean, that's surely everybody should understand that. Second is that El Salvador did not change its currency to cryptocurrency. It just said it's a dollarized country, mind you. It used to have a currency. It changed it to the US dollar. So it's a dollarized economy. The only one of two in
completely dollarized. It's not like in Venezuela that we are using dollars because of the crisis. But in the case of El Salvador and Ecuador, the official currency is the dollar.
Yes. So El Salvador it's a dollarized economy by law. Okay, like it's not like a bi-monetary or anything, nothing. Okay.
So if I was to visit El Salvador, basically I should be packing US dollars with me.
Yes, so it is dependent on
Yes,
the
if you
US
want to
federalism.
take the dollars, if you want to take your debit card, you will use it there, and they're gonna give you dollars, US dollars. I mean, if you don't take your cash, you use your debit card there, and they will give you dollars.
Okay,
So-
good to know.
So there is
Yes.
what Bukele announced 2 years ago was that the cryptocurrency Bitcoin will be a legal currency in El Salvador, but that has not
Exactly.
happened. That has not happened. So what he tried to do was, I think it was a way of money laundering, because that is exactly what happened in El Salvador. That he announced that he will make a cryptocurrency account for each and every person who holds a bank account in El Salvador, and then deposit a certain amount of dollars in their bank account. So for those people, the owners of the bank account, to convert it to cryptocurrency and use it, something like that.
$30 they gave them, actually.
So what happened was that the people, $30. So what happened was that the people took out the dollars, used the dollars, nothing of Bitcoin, and and then the government has a problem that it cannot audit. It has not been able to audit how much it has spent on this scheme, which actually has not prospered at all. So Bitcoin is not a legal currency in El Salvador, although the law exists, and nobody talks about it, at least in El Salvador. Okay, I mean, not even the government talks about it. The Minister of Economy does not talk about it. Nobody talks about it. So it's not like it's prospered. He even made a Bitcoin city or something like that. And it's very funny, actually. The day he was announcing, the president of El Salvador was announcing Bitcoin, the law, he was announcing it in English, which is not the language of El Salvador. So it was probably directed towards foreigners, particularly to people in the US. And he wanted to give the impression that there will be a lot of US investments in El Salvador. Okay, nothing happened. So I don't know. I mean, I cannot see any reason why Venezuela should embrace a system like this, especially a system that it does not control. I think there is a sort of cryptocurrency, not cryptocurrency, but a sort of thing in Venezuela, which Jesus will talk about, because he knows it better. But, Venezuela has no reason to adopt a currency which it will not control, which it will not emit. Okay, that is why Venezuela would not be dollarized. Venezuela would not have any other currency as its legal currency, though it may be de facto used in the economy.
Yes.
But it will not, it's the Central Bank of Venezuela emits only bolivars, and it will continue to do the same, because otherwise, if you do not control your economy, if you do not control your currency, then you do not have any sovereignty. Jesus should talk about the cryptocurrency.
It's a complex issue anyway, Youri. I mean, cryptocurrencies are a hot debate, a hot potato, you might call it. I'm a cryptocurrency enthusiast because I come from circles where we promote technology, free technology, open source software, that kind of issues, and cryptocurrency somehow connects to that philosophy, the philosophy of not having an entity controlling you, some sort of anarchist, approach towards economy and other issues, and in that sense, I like it. And Venezuela has been using, especially during these sanction times, we have been using cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin and all the big, cryptocurrencies that are out there. But we also, as Saheli mentioned, we created our own Petro, which is the official cryptocurrency of Venezuela, and that cryptocurrency can go to exchange, you can trade it in exchange platforms out there, in everything, not in all everywhere, but there are certain, exchange platforms that allow you to exchange that. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that the use of the crypto is, I believe, it's important. There are some myths about how can you control it or not, because some people believe that it is uncontrollable, and the same thing happened with the internet at the beginning. A lot of people saw that no one will knew where you were, but that's not a reality. I mean, in fact, everyone can see where your IP is, and the same thing happened with the cryptocurrency. You leave traces around the system, around the internet, whenever you move any crypto. But in the case of El Salvador, Bukele he actually created this platform for exchange controlled by the government, that allows him to somehow see who was using the crypto, and allow them to also, when I say them, I'm talking about the Salvadorian government, to somehow establish the rate of exchange between bitcoins and the dollar, because that's the money they use there. But at the end of the day, that, as Saheli said, that was like a pote de humo, we say in Spanish, like smoke scream, or something like that.
Yeah.
To try to bring investors, and I mean, you can use, as well as you can use cryptocurrencies here in Venezuela. There are certain businesses, establishment that accept cryptos here. And I believe that the same thing happened in El Salvador, but it's not as massive as Sahili was trying to. No,
Yeah.
Bukele. I'm talking about Bukele. Bukele was trying to
I'm not the
sell.
president of El Salvador.
So the corporate Western corporate state media, I think overblew a story which they sensationalize. But it sounds to me, I just think I just think cryptocurrency, I think, like anything which is supposed to be, an alternative currency, I think, like anything, it needs to be regulated. Simple as that. And even if we hate our whatever capitalist government we live under, whether it's in the US or Australia, Canada, and Britain, something like cryptocurrency, it's better if it's in the hands of the government, so that it's at least properly regulated, so that you don't have the kind of
It depends on the
Ponzi type of
government.
schemes.
But not in the hands of Bukele.
Yeah.
And it depends on the government.
I also think this. But I also think that this fantasy that we can build some kind of a parallel universe, or even a new utopia with cryptocurrency, I think it's a distraction. When I think people in general should be involved in big social movements, left-wing movements, in which we have to be the ones to take power so that we can end this, monopoly capitalist system, which is run by America and their friends, the five families, Britain, New Zealand. They're friends in the European Union and NATO, the pan-Euro empires. I just find that cryptocurrency is a distraction, and people should be much more focused in mobilizing the working class in whatever country they're living in to take power, because I think that's much more of a practical solution than a very precarious hot potato, as you said, or a thing that has lots of red flags. And Jared Ball of Black Power Media, he's a very big critic of like cryptocurrency and so forth. And if folks want to learn more, definitely seek out Jared Ball, Black Power Media. Mix what I like, because he's been talking a lot about how even cryptocurrency, even itself, is basically a libertarian gaslighting industry as well. So
I believe I'm not that critical of it. I believe that is a fact, a reality that happened, and I believe that points into the direction that opposes the financial control of big capital towards the world, you know, and in that sense, you have to see the positive side of it. You know what I mean? I mean, it has positive aspects, and that's why you have many theories and a lot of propaganda out there trying to demonize cryptocurrencies too. So, and you sometimes have to try, you know, I'm not saying that cryptocurrency are the solutions for, you know, world problems, but I believe that there are certain aspects of the cryptocurrency phenomenon that are worth taking into consideration, especially if you oppose the financial control that is being exercised from the US and Europe over billions of human beings around the world. So in that sense, it's a tool that is now out there, and that is actually, at least in the case of Venezuela, helping us bypass sanctions, for example. So in that case, it's positive, at least for Venezuelans, and I'm pretty sure that many other countries might say the same thing that we Venezuelans see in cryptocurrencies. So it's complex. It's not only black and white.
In fact, that said, we should definitely, no, that said, we should definitely, if it's even possible, so open invitation, get Dr. Jared Ball of Black Power Media on to debate cryptocurrency with Graham Elwood, former contributor to the Jimmy Dore Show, who has his own YouTube program, and he's one of those leftists who's very big on like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency is going to save us. I say we invite those two onto debates, and me and Jesus will be moderators.
That will be a good debate.
That will be
because,
interesting.
I mean,
yes, yeah.
there are even environmentalists talking about the issue. You know how bad the cryptocurrency are because they consume a lot of energy, and that's true. I mean, welcome, Joe.
Yeah.
Joe
Joining us on
Emersberger
this
is
special
joining
edition
us.
of 1+1 with Orinoco Tribune is Joe Emersberger, union activist, media critic, NGO critic. The author, Joe, plug your book on Venezuela. We were just talking about Venezuela, but plug your book again.
Yeah, I wrote a book, it feels like 2 years ago now, with Justin Podur called Extraordinary Threat, the U.S. Empire, the Media, and 20 years of coup attempts in Venezuela. So yeah, that's out there for a while now.
Right.
Yeah, and we enjoyed it a lot. We actually wrote a review, we published a review on Orinoco
Thank
Tribune.
you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I remember that. That was good.
Yeah, and then we also interviewed you and Justine. I remember.
I remember that. Yeah, that was nice. That was very nice.
So yeah, okay, nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Let's finish our cryptocurrency, but that debate might be interesting. Youri, the debate about the cryptocurrency, you know, having people with, you know, opposing positions about that.
But you know what we'll do? We'll definitely, you know, I'll definitely be, you know, I'll definitely work very hard to try to get both Jared Ball and Graham Elwood on Orinoco Tribune and 1+1 and have a debate about cryptocurrency.
I'm not that big, you know, expert on those issues, but I, of course, I will be like very humbly participate in anything like that.
Well, before Joe, before we have you talk about what's been going on in Ecuador, which I think has been very criminally overlooked as well. What's been going on in Ecuador? Let's talk about the Argentinian elections, and wow, this is one of those things where my George Carlin misanthrope hatred of humanity comes when I see how the electorate voted for this absolute right-wing nincompoop. I have more I can say about that, but Joe, what's your response to the victory of this far-right libertarian dingbat in Argentina? And in Saheli, I know you have your opinions critical of the left in Argentina about why Milei lived, but yeah, give us your autopsy. But first, I would Joe, I would love your response on on what happened in Argentina.
Well, I mean, he won by a lot. That's the first observation. He wasn't even close. He won by a lot. That's really bad. I think the only thing I have to say is just obviously Macri really put them in a huge hole, this massive loan to the IMF. And when when Fernandez with even though he had Kirchner as a running mate, they just weren't bold enough. They really required really bold and you know, I don't want to be too harsh. Like it's not easy. It would to climb out of the hole. I think that from what I read, that Macri left them with this humongous loan would not have been easy. Would not have been risk free, and maybe it wouldn't have worked. But it looks to me like they tried to play it safe. In my opinion. I mean, I haven't followed very closely, but it seems to me like they obviously didn't make the bold moves they needed to make. And you know, if people if they don't have answers from the left, they'll look to the right. You know, and it doesn't matter if they give crazy answers, but also, you know, some of the stuff he was saying, some of the craziness. I mean, maybe the way he said it, you know, the wild analogies he used, but really libertarian, right-wing libertarian thinking. That's you know, that's not that's common in capitalist countries. I mean, if you look at somebody like Paul Ryan in the United States, his ideas are just as crazy, but he just doesn't express them with these wide, like the crazy chainsaw, like the clownish behavior. But the right-wing libertarian ideas, they're part of the, you know, look at guys like Ron Paul or Rand Paul in the United States. Those guys are there. They're offering this craziness, just they're packaging it maybe in a more sane manner. But it's part of the.
RFK Jr. in the United States, he is like
Yeah.
I keep trying to ask myself, what is it with left-leaning people and propping up this grifter, this charlatan? And my only response is, okay, they might be left-leaning on some issues. They might be great on some anti-imperialist issues, and they might want, you know, single-payer healthcare for everybody. But the attraction to Robert F. Kennedy, that's libertarianism. That's this bizarre libertarian blind spot that even some of the best of the left have. But I was just interviewing Renee Johnston of Black Power Media, and she was saying, look, a guy like RFK Jr. who's already supportive of Israel, that should already be your red flag. Okay, yeah, he might be great on Ukraine, but on everything else, because she said that she actually read like his you know, like his platform when he first announced that he was going to try to, you know, primary Joe Biden, and she says that there's nothing in it that's like Bernie Sanders. There's nothing in it that's like Dr. Jill Stein. There's nothing in it like it's not he's not even offering you something Ralph Nader or Dennis Kucinich. So he's not a leftist. So those people who might be great on such and such an issue, left-leaning issues, but they're propping up RFK, I think it just goes to show you that they're much more libertarian than they give themselves credit for. And Milton Friedman was.
I believe that actually that libertarian. Let me just jump there, but because I kind of hate when people use that adjective. I know that the guy defined himself as libertarian, but he's just a far right crazy man. And you distract the discussion. I believe that the libertarian adjective subtract part of the vaccine, you know, that represents this guy. I just wanted to add that because I usually have to deal with words in my editing work and the use of adjectives and that kind of thing. So, but everyone uses it, and he is the first one using the libertarian whatever. But anyway,
let me actually counsel you on that. Libertarianism, even in its most simplistic definition, is somebody who believes in a free market, a minimal state, in which the state just protects your civil liberties. That's the best simplistic definition of libertarianism. And but then even when you really look, even when you critically assess, Joe mentioned Ron Paul. I remember I used to be a big like Ron Paul fan when I was in high school because I loved his position on ending the drug wars, loved a lot of his anti-imperialist positions. But when I started to really critically analyze, okay, what does it mean that Ron Paul wants to abolish the Federal Reserve, go on the gold standard, wants to abolish the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the Department of interiors, the Department of Education. That's all. Yeah. I mean, that is far right politics. That is anarcho-capitalism, if you will. It is like capitalism on steroids, if you will. But the libertarianism as a movement in the U.S. is unfortunately very big. They're like the godmother of libertarianism is this woman Ayn Rand, and her philosophy literally is greed is good. Her philosophy literally is altruism is evil, and she's one of those crazy far right dingbats that fled Russia not because they were being persecuted by Stalin, but because they were just far right lunatics. And Milton Friedman, who this again, I'm trying not to curse when I mention this Voldemort guy in Argentina, but this right-wing dingbats in Argentina, what's one of his heroes is Milton Friedman, the Chicago Boys, and Milton Friedman often would say that he's a libertarian. And one of Milton Friedman's, students, in fact, one of Ayn Rand's cult followers, Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, he explicitly has said a couple of times that he's a libertarian. And when he was on Democracy Now! Being grilled by Naomi Klein, he kept defending himself as, a libertarian and so forth. So, I'm curious all of your response on that.
Okay. You mentioned anarcho-capitalism. So this guy, Millet, actually calls himself both libertarian and anarcho-capitalist. So he is, but what Jesus meant when he said that the word libertarian actually takes away a bit of the danger from the word fascist or far right. That is the problem. This person does not even want to protect your civil liberties. He does not believe in civil liberties. So he is he even denies that there had been a dictatorship in Argentina. He says that it was not a state terrorism committed on the part of the Argentinian dictatorship. He said that there were both two bad sides, not two sides. So he was
the two-side history.
Yes, it's the
same use in Palestine.
Exactly.
Yeah, the double genocide theory, which I know Joe has a lot.
So he denies that there are 30,000 disappeared people in Argentina from the last dictatorship. He says that it was he even has a particular number. I forget the exact number, but it is 5,339 or something. It's a very exact number, and I don't know where he got it from, but he says it. Okay. So, and his vice president, who will become the vice president, she has relationship with all those all those military generals who had been sentenced to prison terms because of their participation and because of their crimes in the last dictatorship. She met Videla, the dictator, in prison. Wow. And her parents were close to these people. So these are the people
actually, Miley worked for one of those generals that then was released. I mean, he in the early stages, Miley worked as advisor or something from one of those dictatorship generals. I read somewhere.
So this is a guy. I mean, this is a guy that is, if you call him libertarian and with the most basic definition, and you say, well, when somebody says libertarian, that person only thinks that it's about a lot of free market, minimal state. Well, he supports all of that. He said that he is going to exactly abolish the public works department. That's the first thing he announced that he will abolish. He also wants to abolish the Ministry for Equality. Okay, so
and there are many also.
Yeah, he also wants to abolish public education. And it's very interesting that on the same day, that was the, I think, 50 or 60-year anniversary of making education free and public for all in Argentina, which was done by Perón in 1949. On the same day, on the anniversary of the day, he announced that education department will be abolished. So you can imagine what sort of a person this person is, the new president. Okay, you wanted me to say why. You wanted me to say why people elected this person. Well, I think they were desperate. It's the same desperation. Yes. well, Argentina is probably going into hyperinflation. It will. I mean, even with Milei, it will go into hyperinflation. So its inflation was already 140% at the time of the election. And you have as the candidate, the Minister of Economy. So your presidential candidate is the Minister of Economy in a country which has more than 100% inflation consistently for over a year. That's not a very good look for any party, like from whichever part of the political spectrum they might be. And I will add to Joe what Joe said, that they were trying to play safe when they accepted another loan from the IMF. I think I talked about this before that why the IMF loan itself was illegal. I think I talked about it at length a year ago with you. So I believe that they should have just defaulted. That would probably have been a much better, bolder position for Argentina. It had happened already, and Argentina did not, die or was wiped off the face of the earth or anything. So they could have played a bolder position. And because it did not help. I mean, taking the loan to pay back a loan that was already illegal, and if nobody knows where that money went, it went to tax havens. It did not, it was not invested in anywhere in Argentina, nowhere. So all the money that came, it just went back to Macri and his friends. So they took that money from IMF, they hoarded it, and then you have a next government which had promised that it will solve this problem. Alberto Fernandez, before taking possession, when he was elected, before he was inaugurated, he actually said that taking a loan from IMF was like trying to cure drunkenness by drinking more, something like this. And then he goes on to do the same thing. Okay, so people will consider this as a betrayal, and it was considered as a betrayal. And I think everybody could understand what was going to happen. Okay, and it's Milei is there, but if you look at his cabinet, all the people are either they were in Macri's government. His Minister of Economy is the same person who was the Minister of Economy for Macri and had negotiated that IMF loan. And his Minister of Security will be Patricia Bullrich, who was also Macri's Minister of Security.
It's going to be a disaster under
under Goldemore. She is also a war criminal. I should also call her a war criminal because she had sent weapons of war to the Giannini Áñez dictatorship in Bolivia, which was used to weapons, bullets and stuff, which was used to suppress protests there after she had couped in Bolivia in 2019. So you can see that the circle, it's just a totally fascist circle that Milei has, and it's Macri governing by proxy.
But then want your response to I want all of your responses to this when it comes to my election autopsy on what happened in Argentina and why I think we should be angry at the electorate. let's be a little bit George Carlin. Let's be a little bit misanthropic here. Okay, I understand I understand that it's terrible that under a left-leaning government they still accepted the IMF. And I completely agree with what Joe said about how they dug themselves in a hole doing that, as opposed to what Christina and her husband did when they were first in power, and they had a similar situation, all caused by these libertarian dingbats, these free market Chicago boys, deregulating the economy and so forth. Okay, so I understand people can be angry about that, and they dug themselves in the corner, and they should have just said, they should have played to an anti-American electorate, which is always there in Latin America, which is we're not going to pay another dime to these Yankees and stuff like that. But voting for Melli is gonna make all that stuff way worse. And I'm just angry at the Argentinian electorate because there's enough Argentinians who lived through the Menem years, who lived through the Kirchner years when, it was not all hunky-dory, but they brought the country at least somewhat back to normal and stable again. And the austerity that Argentina was forced to do was only because of this Macri guy who basically said, the very reasons why you're all miserable is because of, U.S. imperialism and this free market system. I'm just going to double down on that. And that's why Macri was later overthrown. We have, the left come back in, and I understand the criticisms you have, Saheli, and I understand the criticism Joe has of the left, but for an electorate to vote for a guy who literally is just going to make the root of all evil literally on steroids, like it's going to be, I'm just angry at the electorate because there should be enough of the electorate that has lived through the Menem years and the Macri years to know that you do not trust right-wing dingbats like this guy, and we don't want to go down the way of Brazil with what they did in with Bolsonaro. So I'm still angry at the electorate, and I'm going to remain angry at the electorate of Argentina. You guys' response to that?
No, I believe that you are right. I mean,
Thank you.
But it's a complex issue, and whatever Joe said and Sahili said is true, and you have to add to what they say that there's also a political, vacuum there. I mean, I don't know how to call it. It's like a centrifuga, or I mean, there is this lawfare against Cristina Fernandez that didn't help on the peronismo, the justicialismo to present her as a candidate. And I believe that if she was a candidate, I believe that the result might have been different. I'm not saying that Cristina Fernandez doesn't have her own enemies and down there in Argentina, but I believe that the result might have been different if they allowed her to run. But the problem is that you have in Argentina also that thing that is called the judiciary party, which is a fact. I mean, the judiciary in Argentina is being used to attack anything, especially anything connected to peronismo, to Kirchnerismo. So that's another reality. And that connects to what Sahili was saying about, I mean, you have the Minister of Economy being the candidate in a country where the economy is a mess. And they are not even sanctioned like us. I mean, in Venezuela, I mean,
that's a huge point.
Exactly, the inflation here in Venezuela is, I mean, they are reaching the levels of inflation that we have in Venezuela right now. And they are not even sanctioned, and they are in very good amicable terms with the US and Europe. So it's a
Joe,
complex issue. I'm not trying to justify the electorate.
So Joe, what's your opinion of my George Carlin, the public sucks autopsy I gave?
Well, even with this big victory, a huge 44% or something still rejected him. So, I mean, that's still a lot of people, right? So
yes.
you have to temper that somewhat, right? And despite everything, despite the fact that they have a horrible economic situation, it's a huge point that they can't really point to the U.S. like Maduro could in 2018 and say, well, look, these guys are openly trying to kill us. I mean, that, because when Maduro he didn't have that as openly, like in 2015 when they lost control of the National Assembly. I mean, the United States was always being sabotaging them, but it just became so blatant after 2017, and that's why they had that huge victory in the governor's elections in 2017 before Maduro won re-election in 2018. So I'm just saying it was a different circumstance where you had a very, very obvious external enemy trying to strangle your economy. That's a very different situation. The electorates, they can understand that. Whoa, wait a second, those guys are trying to kill us. Whereas in Argentina, if they don't have that, you could. It's not totally irrational for the electorate to be extremely angry at the government that's in power. And also, I guess the point I was trying to make is that no matter how crazy and clownish this guy is, those well, yes, they are misnamed. Those far right ideas are always lying around. They're always circulating around and being sold to people constantly in any capitalist society. That's always present. And when the left wins power, they win control of the government, but they don't win control in a capitalist country. They have all these media and business elites who are working with the foreign powers to undermine them. It's all there. So they're not playing by the same rules as when a right-wing government, wins power. It's not the same thing.
I just wanna add something to that. You have to see the positive side of the outcome of the electoral outcome, and positive between quotations. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I believe that that Milei, if he keeps his promises, lasts half of his term.
So you
I
think
mean,
yeah, that wouldn't shock me if he gets thrown out before, if he actually tries to follow through on a lot of his craziness. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you think even if he might have some kind of of a mandate or a majority in Congress, or has other right-wing allies, that if he tries to do a civilizational downgrade on Argentina, like what they've done with Eastern European countries, that the left in Argentina, the People Power movement, will very quickly mobilize. The way when Bolsonaro started to do his reign of terror, there was already a huge popular left mobilization against him.
I believe that in Argentina it's gonna be bigger than that even in Brazil.
Yeah. Actually, I think this is also could be one of the positive outcomes that Jesus wanted to talk about.
Yes.
Because, the moment he actually announced that he is going to privatize again the Argentinian Airlines, the union that airlines has, they have already come out and, of course, they have protested against it, and they said that they have a plan to stop it. Then there is another interesting thing which I recently found out, is that Milei had been saying that he would be privatizing again the petroleum industry of Argentina. All these things had been privatized during the Menem years, and it was the Kirchners who had actually slowly renationalized them back. Could not do all of them, but tried to do most. So in case of this, I mean, in the IPF also, like the petroleum industry, when Cristina was in government, I think during her second term, she had passed a law through the Senate and everything. So it's a law that they need 2/3 majority in Congress, like in the parliament, in both houses of parliament, in order to privatize the petroleum industry again. And even with the support, like even if Milei has the support of the Macri part, like it's Juntos por Cambio, I think they changed their name to something else, but anything. Anyway, so whatever it is, like the other right wing, the Macri right wing, even if Milei has their support all the time, even then they are not reaching 2/3 in both House of Congress. So it could be that he would not be able to keep all his promises. He's already, like, he wants to also like dissolve the central bank. I don't know what are the laws about it, whether he can do it. He wants to dollarize the economy, whether he can do it or not. So there are already there are already pockets of protest, especially coming from the unions. And there are also all these laws which exist, which may be weak, but still, I mean, Argentinian state is very weak. We must remember that the state is weak. So despite that, there are some small laws here and there that might act as an obstacle for the time being, so that people can, I think, regroup and just try to stop it maybe. And probably, yeah, he might last half his term if he tries to do everything that he promised. There will
hopefully he's impeached within 2 months. Anyways,
he does not even need.
Or maybe he end up being chased like the other guy. I forgot, De La Rúa.
De La Rúa.
Do you remember De La Rúa was a president that only lasted like 1 year or 2 years in power, and then he had to take a helicopter running out of the people that wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah, and then Argentina had like 5 presidents in a week, and then
sure. Well, Henry Kissinger and Alistair Darling, who was part of like the Blair Witch Project in Britain, and Gordon Brown's awful neoliberal reign of terror, both of them died recently So let's hope Melly just dies of a heart attack, like poof, like there. Like, I think that would be the best thing for all of humanity. But anyways,
Yeah, Yuri, be careful. YouTube will just delete your delete your channel.
Yes.
disclaimer: I do not wish the death on horrible right-wing libertarian monsters. Anyways, so changing. Actually, before we talk about Ecuador, one quick question, one quick follow-up about Argentina. Joe, you're a media critic, and you and the job you do, I feel so bad that you do a job like that, where you constantly have to read and debunk all the propaganda from Western corporate state media and even like Spanish ones. But then when it comes to Argentina, I'm actually curious how much was the corporate media and right-wing newspapers. I don't know if there's more right-wing newspapers and right-wing magazines in Argentina than left-wing ones or liberal-ish ones. So were many of them very supportive of Melly, or
I honestly, I couldn't. I haven't followed Argentina. I haven't even followed really the Western media in Argentina, because you can only follow so much, right? And actually, I mean, I try to criticize media and I follow it. I mean, it's you can't escape it. You don't even have to follow it, because they stick their views in your face. Like, if you actually even watch popular television, how they portray Venezuela, or, or how they talk about communism or anything. It's everywhere. Even if you avoided news media entirely, you just get their takes from you get your propaganda from the entertainment. I mean, it's everywhere. So you can't even avoid it. But what I guess the point I'm making is this whole right wing, far right, abolish the central bank, go to the gold standard. The free market doesn't exist. Libertarianism is a misnomer. So is the free market. There's no free market. All markets require property rights. So property rights are enforced by somebody. Who enforces property rights? Well, the government, right? So I mean, if I decide I like your sweater, I'm going to rip it off your body. Well, someone's going to take me to jail for that, right? So, but all those ideas are constantly peddled to people in on various ways. Like so he's like I said, like Trump, those guys, sometimes Bolsonaro, their presentation is over the top and crazy, but the ideas that they have are always circulating, are always there, always in the media, in the entertainment media, and even in the sports media. I mean, you can't even watch sports without getting some their politics thrown at you. So yeah, so I just it's always that guys like Tucker Carlson, and he was like down there promoting Malay, and so there's these far right so-called libertarians. Their views are always floating around in the culture in a capitalist society. So there's always that that option being kind of kept alive in people's brains. If we just eliminate all taxes, if we just eliminate central, it's always being kept alive. So we shouldn't be that surprised that when people are desperate, that okay, let's give that a try. That because it's being constantly legitimized as a possible alternative.
I remember once talking to an Argentinian friend of mine, actually, who's definitely left leaning. Yeah, definitely a bit left leaning. And I remember, talking to her once about, Christina Kirchner, and was just asking, like, so how's Argentina doing under Christina? And she says, I don't know. The media only talks about her shoe collection. So
that's so sexist.
I mean,
also, by the
yeah.
way.
So even when you're a leftist and you get elected, whether it's a big mandate or you're always going to have to deal with such a reactionary, regressive right-wing enemies, and it only takes a few stupid people on the left to also fall for the propaganda, to also begin to sabotage you. And I think this is I like what you said, Joe, that like even when you try to escape like corporate media, you're still going to get some kind of a capitalist message in you. We have this with propaganda shows. We have this where even when we know so much of the CIA's endless crimes against humanity, there still is occasionally a movie where the good guy is a CIA agent. Like,
That's true.
and sometimes he just happens to be, a black person or like a woman, and I always, love that. So Jesus, before we get to Ecuador, I'm curious, like you're like, was the media very pro Meli, or very hostile towards the left leaning governments? Did many of them endorse Meli, or did they do this whole thing of, we both have bad choices, but don't elect the idiots and go and hold your nose and vote for the center left government? Like, I'm curious, because media does have an impact on people, and I sometimes, actually, I'm always constantly undermining how much the media, corporate state media, does affect people. That's the one thing I actually always underestimate. So I'm curious, what was the Argentinian?
You have to add to that Milei also announced that he was going to privatize Argentina public television, which is the only state media that they have there. He announced that the privatization of that one too. But anyway, I mean, you have to recognize, people outside our region should know that mainstream media is controlled by the far right. I mean, always historically has been like that. And Argentina is not the exception. I mean, you have La Nación, you have, what is the other one?
Globo.
Which one?
Globo in Brazil.
Argentina.
But I'm thinking about Argentina.
Clarín.
Clarín, which
Clarín.
is the worst of the worst. Exactly. La Nación, Clarín, those are the biggest, outlets there, and they are far right all the way. And you only have, if you ask me, I believe that the only outlet that I know there that is a bit leftist is Página 12.
Yeah, it's a union outlet actually. That's why it's a journalist union outlet.
So I don't see too many options. And the worst part is that social media also have a say, because you get kids are not watching or reading those outlets anymore. Kids, I mean, I'm talking, when I say kids, I'm talking about the younger people between 15 and 30 years, and they are just consuming
the far right movements. A lot of them, I mean, even if they are funded by some dodgy millionaire, but like things like Breitbart, or in Britain we have this wonderful outlet called Spiked Online, and now there's like GP News and so forth. I mean, even if they are funded by some dodgy millionaire and whatnot, they have penetrated social media. So for every time I have you guys on my news feed and I'm getting well informed, I know for a fact that there is some poor Joe or
algorithm
operation that's just getting an avalanche of far right media, and it could be Tucker Carlson, it could be GB News, it could be Spiked Online, and then occasionally corporate media, which is center right to far right.
Actually, in case of Latin America, I always tell it to everyone that in case of Latin America, there is no right and far right. It's all far right. I mean, right is very far right. There is no democratic right in Latin America. It's all fascist. Okay, so mainstream media is actually far right. In case of Argentina, since Jesus mentioned Clarín, Clarín is not only a newspaper, it's an empire. It owns telecommunications. I mean, it does not even own channels. It also holds internet. I mean, it has a big internet service platform in Argentina, and it also has TV channels. So it has, it's more than, and when I say it's an empire, I mean it's an empire. Okay? And in a state like Argentina, where the state structure is, state institutions are weak, and you have a judiciary, also a state institution, which is very far right. So in a situation like that, nobody is going to stop an outlet like Clarín from disseminating fake news all the time, which they do all the time. So like Clarín and Nación.
That's when I mentioned social media because
in social media also they are
social
there.
media. I mean, those outlets get into social media, but the problem is that the social media platforms are controlled by the far right.
Exactly.
I mean, by the US, by the CIA.
And Elon
I mean,
Musk. Well,
so it's not even like
Elon Musk and even the previous owner of
Twitter.
They were both like they both are self-described like libertarians and so forth. So they are of the far they are of the far right. And yeah.
In social media you have, like, if you go into Argentinian social media, you will see it. They are always linking to Clarín because Clarín is also behind the algorithm because it's an empire. It owns the satellite communication. It has the internet. So it is not like Breitbart, something very niche, but it is actually mainstream media. Mainstream media is very right wing in all of Latin America. And in case of Argentina, they are like empires, both Nación and Clarín, but especially Clarín. Like it is said that it has the power to change governments. So in case of Milei, actually, I try to follow Argentina. So Milei has been like he's not an outsider, at least as far as Argentinian media is concerned. He has been given airspace since 2018.
yes.
Like even when Macri was there, he was drummed up as a very good economist, like as a great economist. Then he had an economy show with a friend of his with whom he fell out later. But anyway, they had an economy show on Clarín, I believe. Then he has been presented as a football player for Boca Juniors. I don't even know he played in the at what age
For a
or in
few
first
months, I
division or
believe.
anything. But he has been like presented as that. And in a country like Argentina, where football is very popular, that you would have a target audience.
So that makes him really cool.
That you would have a target audience whom you can show. They have a president who plays football or something like that, a football playing president. So you have all these features that already existed, not now from 2018. Milei was a feature in Argentinian mainstream media from 2018. And the mainstream media is the one that has the biggest platform in Argentina. Social media is also mainstream media controlled. So it's not like he was an outsider. He was a libertarian who just erupted into the political scene and just destroyed Peronismo or something like that. He is actually a construct by media, the judiciary party, also the military party, because he also so much praises the military dictatorship and thinks that it saved Argentina from, I don't know, communism perhaps. So, in a situation like this, I believe that there are many people, especially young people, who are actually looking at social media. They were also just looking at mainstream media. They do not know. And young people, many of them might not remember. You said Menem years. Those who were not born in the 90s at least or before, they don't remember it. Those who lived during the Kirchner years, they might think that it has always been like this and it does not matter who is in government.
Yes.
Oh, God.
But anyway, I believe that media can be defeated. I mean, whenever I hear someone giving excuses about the media, I just remember all the media attacks against Chavez in 98, and afterwards all the way. But Venezuela also had still has an important media control, system. But I believe that media is something that you can defeat, and it cannot be. I cannot be used as an excuse.
With you on that, and okay, and Joe, I promise this will be the last one. Then we're going to talk about Ecuador, which you know very well about. But then why is it then that people who think a protest vote is voting for somebody like Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, Brexit, when it's not even in the hands of the left, when it's in the hands of grifters and hucksters and and wheeler dealers like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. I don't get how that's a protest, how that's a protest vote, voting for the very people who are going to continue on with the reactionary politics, which you guys claim you're against, like, why can't, you know, like, even when Maduro, like, even at the height of so much propaganda that we got about him, that even left-leaning people were like, you know, recycling and like washing their hands of the Bolivarian movement. You know, it took somebody like Abby Martin and, you know, my friend Alfred Zayas to really, like, you know, push back against just the constant propaganda we were getting on Venezuela. And then, you know, there became like a big shift of, you know, of renewed Venezuela, you know, solidarity. But in Venezuela, like, why can't other left electorates just do what they did in Venezuela, which is like, okay, yeah, things aren't great, but we are not going to give like our votes to the effing fascists and to the people who want to, you know, align with America, which is literally the root of all evil in Latin America and Canada as well, and so forth. But instead, like, why do we keep getting people whose idea of a protest vote is Bolsonaro, is Boris Johnson, is the Liberal National Party in Australia, or again, like Pumpkinhead, like in the United States and so forth? Like, so why can't, yeah, so yeah, what? Why can't we be more like the Venezuelans? God damn it! You guys respond.
Go ahead, guys. You know Argentina better.
I really, I
It's
mean,
not about Argentina, though. It's about Venezuela.
And you see,
yes,
and this is why
yes.
everybody, and you see, this is why everybody should adopt my George Carlin ethos of the public sucks. And sometimes you just gotta be a misanthrope.
Oh, I can agree with you that
Uh,
we can't be in denial about what the public thinks. Like if you look at polls from Israel, the majority are frankly in favor of genocide. I mean, there's no denying that. There's no sugarcoating that. It's just the fact. You know, it's just a fact. So I'm not averse to acknowledging ugly things about public opinion, but I just think you have to be careful with it. Like I wouldn't make a sweeping comparison like you did between like somebody like Boris Johnson or Trump in the imperial core and some right wing guy like Milei in Argentina. Even though I don't know Argentina well enough, but I'd still be leery about making that comparison.
Okay.
And also, I mean,
but
you know, yeah, the media can be defeated, but I think one thing that we have to look at, I mean, what country in our region has political stability combined with real development uh, is Cuba. And despite economic sanctions. So what haven't they done? They haven't played the liberal democracy game of allowing these fascist institutions to have a foothold. So even when you have a supposedly left or a genuine left government, they always have to contend with this whole like yeah, Chavez was able to defeat the and Maduro to some extent the right wing establishment media and stuff. But why are they even allowed there? Why? I mean, it's not an easy. I'm not criticizing them for not adopting Cuba's model. It's not easy to do. I mean, Cuba's paid a horrendous price for it. But I'm just saying that we should maybe acknowledge that there is a price for paying this whole so-called quote unquote capitalist democracy game at all, because it never is. You allow the huge levers of power to reside with oligarchs, and then you try to have elected governments kind of navigate that, and it's very difficult. You make progress, but then you get thrown back. You know, you get so it's a very difficult problem.
and
Yeah,
it's a
I
worldwide problem, you know. It's
Yeah.
a problem that happen everywhere, and
Yeah.
sometimes when you talk about the public opinion and how the media might impact the decision, I think about what happened in the North, in US, Canada, and Europe, and I always wonder why people keep voting for the same clowns over and over and over, and I don't have an answer to that besides, you know, just like the continuation of the status quo and propaganda and media. Am
Political
I wrong
education.
or no? What?
No. You're completely right. In fact, I interviewed you know, our mutual comrade Claudia, who's Peruvian American, writes for Black Agenda Reports as part of Black Alliance for Peace, and she was talking to me about how even right now in Peru against the popular against the right-wing backed Western-backed coup government, she was saying that even right now in Peru there is nasty divisions that are starting to develop between the popular mobilization, between those who are part of the grassroots left in Peru who want radical change, constituent assembly and stuff like that, and these other basically middle-class bourgeois grifters and people who are part of the expat community who they might claim they're left and that they're left-leaning, but then when you start to go into their backgrounds, they're in that NGO world, or their parents actually are supportive of center-right, right-wing parties in Peru. So even at the moment, there are people trying to kneecap, popular left mobilization in a place like Peru. And I asked Claudia, well, then how do you overcome that? Especially when it comes to those, right-wing middle-class expat communities and the affluent one. And she says, political education. We actually need to do much more political education. And I've heard a version of that, on American politics, about Eastern European politics and so forth. So, yeah. But let's talk about Ecuador. Joe, what's been going on in Ecuador, and why is the right wing there still continuing to win? Why did the left wing not? Why weren't they able to make a comeback?
Well, I think they kind of did. I mean, they lost, but they got 48% of the vote, so the election was close. First of all, so that's a positive thing. I take quite a bit of solace from that, because for the past 6 years they've been trying to outlaw and basically criminalize the Correa's movement entirely. So, 6 years later, they have the largest bloc in the National Assembly. Not a majority, because they deliberately made changes to atomize the vote, but they have the largest, like over a third of the seats. They have the largest bloc in the National Assembly, and the candidate was not Correa, because he's not allowed to run. She got 48% of the vote, and so it was a close election. And the right-wing candidate who won, he was not a Malay. He actually tried to depict himself as progressive, or as kind of a progressive leaning person. He wanted to run at one point with Correa's. I mean, they rejected him, of course, but he's a rich guy. So, but he's not like Malay, where he's like in your face trying to be right wing. It's actually the opposite. He's trying to depict himself as something other than he was, and which is funny though, because
story.
But his running mate, which is funny, he's already fallen out with his running mate, his VP, because in Ecuador you elect you elected two together. You elect the vice president and the president together at the same time. His running mate was a libertarian, very similar ideas to Malay. She wants to she's been caught. She wants to talk about she doesn't even like dollarization. She wants to have gold standard. Like, she just like, we shouldn't even have a dollar. We just use gold. And, just the same ideas like Malay, very extreme. And she was his running mate. And despite the fact that Noboa's trying to portray himself, so he was basically now he's sent her off to Israel to be an ambassador to Israel. He sent his VP off to be an ambassador, and she's already bad mouthing him, saying, he betrayed me. So there's lots of infighting already in his right off the bat. He's barely got in the door, and he's already fighting with his own running mate. So, but he was very deceptive. He's basically a fresh face, somebody who wasn't expected to do anything. He just basically popped in. So it's a different strategy there. It's sometimes you present somebody new, and you let people kind of project their own ideas onto him. And I think that's what barely got them over the hump this time. So yeah, it's very hard, because you have the vilification and the court cases and throwing people in jail and driving them into exile. All has an impact, and so that they were able to ride that out, just creep over the edge and hang on to the presidency. But it's very different than Argentina, because, like I said, he wasn't trying to portray himself as far right at all. He was trying to portray himself as kind of a somewhat progressive leaning person, So It's very different.
Yeah.
But
Joe, let me ask you something. Why do you
sure.
think Correísmo is not making it? I mean, how do you explain, these several, the recent defeats of Correísmo in presidential elections in Ecuador? Is something that amazed me because I believe that Correa did amazing things for Ecuador.
He
I
did.
mean, in terms of the stabilization and economy, and I don't know what happened there.
Well, he did, but that's why he's not allowed to run, right? He has like some last time I counted like 40 different court cases, and he's been sentenced, and he's in exile. He has political asylum in Belgium, so he isn't allowed to run. So yeah, so that's and if it's very different. Like I know he endorsed Luisa Gonzalez just like he endorsed the Rouslav's time, but that's not the same thing. I mean, you remember the first election Maduro had, 2013, he almost lost. He's the new guy. Chavez endorsed him, so why didn't he easily just prevail? It's doesn't necessarily translate your political capital.
And now that you mention that, I remember that he endorses Lenin Moreno, and maybe people are like cautious about that because Lenin Moreno was a mess. So maybe that explain.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes,
the,
exactly. No, that is a huge factor. Okay, like Korea can endorse somebody, but how do you know that person's trustworthy? Because he already endorsed one guy who everyone hates. So yeah, that is a factor. Of course it is. That's that, and he
yes,
devoured.
I never thought about it.
He devoured the movement from within. So it's a very different situation from others that we've seen in like with Macri. At least Macri won, but Macri didn't portray himself as a Christina ally, win the election, and then turn around and become what Macri really is, right? It's a very different situation. So yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that yeah, so that
same problem in Peru. The current dictator was part of Castillo's
yeah.
party.
Yeah.
So we also so again, the left also has this problems of the kind of enemies from within.
I know Jesus can tell you enemies from within are always a problem for any left movement because you're working in a capitalist context, and there's always the it seems like betrayals are more. I don't know if they're more common, but they seem more damaging. Like even if you go back to the Soviet Union, you had Trotsky, who became the mortal enemy of his own of the movement that came to power. Or if you think of Chavez, you can run through the list of all the people who betrayed Chavez over the years.
Yes.
Right from the very beginning. Top level, his top allies, like the one guy Maquilena, who's like his mentor, right? And then more recently,
yes,
yeah, and then more recently, Luis Ortega, right? That was long after, right? But for many years, everyone thought of her as like more Chavista than Chavez. And then
let me interrupt you. When I was preparing myself for this webinar that we had a few days ago about the Constituent Assembly, out of the old constituent assemblies that were there, I tried to count how many of them remain in Chavismo, and I believe that only 1/3 of those that wrote the Venezuelan Constitution of 1999 are still within Chavismo. Of course, many of them are died and whatever, but that's amazing.
This reminds, but that also reminds me of of a recurring theme that seems to happen in Latin America politics. But it's this bizarre thing of the expat communities because take the Hispanic population or the Latinx population in the United States. I always find it baffling that you could have people from an entire, that you can have people from Mexico, people from El Salvador, people from whatever country that like America and Canada has like literally like lit fire. These are why so many of these people had to, flee the country legally and illegally, and yet they come to like the U.S. where they face the same like institutional racism, and yet they can vote for either, and yet they vote for right-wing Democrats like the Obamas and the Clintons, or the Republican Party. And some of them even know the history of Latin America, like they know all this, and yet talk to them about Nicaragua, today, talk to them about Venezuela, and like, you know, they basically have the opinions of a Gabriel. You basically have, like, you know, an entire community of Gabriel Borics, these people who call themselves left-leaning. They may even call themselves like socialists, but then they'll go, like, they go even like one step further, like, you know, anti-communism, leftism, that's always, you know, been a problem, which I think has kneecapped, you know, left movements. But something like a Boric, or you know, or these, or a Boric type of person, these are the people who, you know, who say, like, you know, I'm a socialist, not like, you know, Cuba. But the fact that they can throw Nicaragua under Ortega, or Chavez under the bus, or even like Evo Morales, it's like, dude, you're not a leftist then. Like, I like, like,
They do the
well,
same
this
even
is
with Cuba.
nonsense.
I mean, so.
Mind you, let me just add though that in Europe, if the entire wall of Ecuador voted the way the European expats in Europe voted, Korea would have been by a landslide. Korea would have won because the expat community in Europe and even the United States is not as supportive of Korea, but it's not like it's not nothing like the Venezuelan expat. Like they're very actually there's a huge
More
support for them.
balance.
So, because
Yes.
they tended to flee Ecuador, bulk of them from the late 90s, from the collapse of the total implosion of Ecuador's economy under neoliberalism. So there's very different politics from other expat communities, you know. So it depends, right? It's hard to say. It's not always the same.
This actually
But
reminded me of something that in case of the Chilean primary, I mean the left's primary election also, I think in Europe, the Chilean expat community in Europe had voted for Daniel Jadue overwhelmingly. They did not vote for Boric. Boric won with the vote of his own country. So I think it depends on who the expats are and their
When they came.
origins, their history. Yeah, when they came also, yes. Because the Chilean expat community in Europe, as well as in Asia, there is a smaller Chilean expat community in Asia. They had fled from Pinochet's dictatorship. So I think they also conserve their historical memory that the children who are born, you know, away from their country. I believe that their parents, grandparents, they pass on the stories and they remember. So in my opinion, historical memory is very important, and it's not just the duty of families, but also the duty of governments, left governments, to conserve memory of what they have done. You know, it's a media battle. I believe it's a media warfare, but it has to be done.
Yes.
oh yeah, I mean, but you know, even I mean, I was even just thinking about Haiti and how even so many people who claimed that they were, you know, Lavalas supporters and supporter of Aristide, it seemed as if, like, the moment, like, the propaganda war begun against Aristide, I believe the NGOs played an instrumental role in making sure that there was no big anti-war movement against the, you know, the coup against Aristide, like there was against the Iraq War, which is another contradiction which we should definitely explore one of these days. But there are many. Yeah.
I just want to say, in the case of Haiti, I know as a fact that if you came to Canada, you could not, even if you loved Aristide dearly, you would not come to Canada and be saying that unless you wanted, because you'd end up being sent back. So
Wow.
there was tremendous pressure. There's also, it depends on the situation, but in Haiti, I know around 2004, you could not come to Canada and broadcast that you were a Lavalas guy, unless you wanted to jeopardize your ability to stay in Canada. So that's a factor too.
Definitely the NGO.
No, I don't deny that, but
like,
I'm just saying that when you talk about expat communities, right? There's different pressures, right? There's different pressures to conform, right? So that's a factor too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting how we try to overcome that, because you know because this is a topic I wanted to talk about with Eve Engler one day, but you know, it'll happen. But you also have the problem where you have people who who are part of the Palestinian diaspora and wider, Middle East, West Asian diaspora communities, who are great when it comes to the issue of Palestine, supportive of a democratic, one-state, secular solution, so forth. And yet those very same people who, marched against the Iraq war, are great on Palestine, were all very supportive of the war for oil in Libya. And Syria, my God, they were aggressive in in supporting the Western Gulf Israeli-Turkish war on Syria and so forth. And then that's when you have to look. Okay, that's when you have to look. Okay, why are they doing that? And then that's where again, are they part of Middle Eastern institutes which are being funded by the Gulf countries like Qatar, UAE, and so forth? They're probably or they're watching Al Jazeera, which Al Jazeera English, it's targeted at a left-leaning audience. But then if you look, so there's all of that stuff that that comes into play. And also I think some people also probably do harbor a lot of reactionary views, but just are very good at keeping it to themselves, because if they speak Arabic and they watched Al Jazeera Arabic, which literally had people talking about genociding Alawites and being very supportive of ISIS, even interviewing ISIS folks. This is
Syria was huge in terms of divisions in the left. But there's always divisions to exploit. Like, just to bring it back to Ecuador, the whole, and it's not an easy topic. The indigenous movement in Ecuador definitely has a very right-leaning element that is very hard for any left government to deal with, because Correa's movement had to use the oil revenue to alleviate poverty, but then would get attacked for being extractivist, So, and that was something NGOs and people could exploit to work divisions among the left, to divide the left. There's always ways you can divide the left. If you have money to do it, that helps, right? And on the business of, that Jesus mentioned about traitors and people who turn away. A lot of times, there's a reason they spy so much. You get dirt on people, and you find out where they're vulnerable, and those vulnerabilities can be exploited. That can peel people away sometimes, or sometimes people just change. Sometimes people start with one mentality, and as they have some access to power, some access to influence, they just change. I mean, people change, right? And there's all these pressures that kind of induce them to change. So all sorts of things happen. There's all sorts of challenges for left governments that, right wingers can just paper over with money, right? And there's no contradiction for them, because it's all about money for them anyway.
And it can even happen. Spot on. And it can even happen to the best of the left, where I wouldn't describe myself as a as a Trotskyist, but you even had some Trotskyists who are very good on anti-imperialism, even if they might spend way too much time criticizing whatever left governments, and of course engaging in the anti-communist leftism. But then you have these other Trotskyists in which it's dude, get out of here! You're
Don't make me talk about Trotskyists.
No, but it's
I don't want to jump there.
But it is incredible, and I can vouch. There's a lot of times when we talk with leftists, especially leftists from working class backgrounds, who hate the bourgeoisie, who hate middle class people. There's always even when they say the word bourgeoisie, it's always they're about to vomit in their mouth. And it's interesting, because I am from a middle class background, but definitely not affluent, upper middle class and stuff like that. But there is that problem with with the middle class, in which you have some people who have just enough access that they can get into their overpriced schools like Harvard and stuff like that. And then there are others who are just what I call precarious middle class. It only just takes one of their parents losing their jobs or something like that, or so in which they find themselves becoming very much, poor and so forth, having to do 3 jobs and stuff like that, and then they can be converted to leftism, but oftentimes, and I know this from experience, those middle class person, the moment they find a really good job, it's like they are back on like the right wing gravy train, or propping up like the Obamas of the world, the Justin Trudeau's of the world. So even like me as a leftist, middle class, like I observe that, a lot with bourgeoisie and so forth. So curious you guys' responses to that.
Don't make me
No
jump
comments, really? Well, let me just say, you guys are lucky that you guys don't have to deal with those kind of middle class.
Okay, no, actually it exists everywhere, I believe. So when you're talking about middle class, and it's a very big gray area, because what is middle class? What is its definition, right? So I saw an Argentinian political meme which said basically that you are not middle class, you are a salaried working class. Okay,
Yes.
so this is something that whom you described as precarious middle class, working 3 jobs. A person forced to work 3 jobs to make ends meet is not middle class. That person can in no way be affluent, even if they work 3 jobs. It's just like you have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. That's a working class person, in a very precarious
But even
situation.
if he works 1 shift, he's still a worker.
Yes.
I mean, the whole middle class construction is just
also-
something created to try to make
Divisions
the proletariat believe that they are going to become one day the capitalist class, which is a lie. We are, I mean, the people in the middle class never are going to be there unless extremely rare circumstances.
like if they win $1 billion lottery.
The school I went to, like the school I went to, we had rich people. We had like very affluent people who like were born silver spoons, Cadillac in their mouths, or however the expression is. And then you had people who were middle class, like their parents like, worked in like, some, they worked for a corporation which paid them just enough to do well. But these were the kind of kids who, like, the moment, like, when it comes to actually having to go to college, if they wanted to go to an overpriced, school in Canada, in Australia, in England, the United States, they very quickly are part of like, like the working. They're very much part of the working class, and even if they are able to get a scholarship, even if their parents are able to like pay like the overpriced, tuition, or they have to take a loan, the moment they're in like the job world, they are back to being a struggling, low income working poor, actually, because they have to do these stupid internships which don't pay them. And even if the internship does pay them, doesn't pay them enough and so forth. So, and you find like a lot of that in those like white collar job, what they call white collar jobs, right? When it comes to like middle class and stuff like that, so, and the funny definitions that people give.
Yeah, well, I think Parenti, I think he said it in one talk. Michael Parenti said, that there's really only 2 classes. There's the capitalist class, and there's everybody else, and that all the talk of the professional class and everything is just confused. I kind of see where he's coming from, but I don't totally agree. I think the professional class, the doctors, the lawyers, the account, there's certain people with kind of specialized skills that every economy needs. And they have more inducement to buy into the system gives them a lot of incentive to buy into the kind of elitist thinking and adopt very selfish values. And I think Correa said something I agree with, that one thing a society has to produce is not just its things, but it has to produce values. And we get all kinds of messages in our system that promote this idea that you do it all yourself, that you're not relying on a society. If you got ahead, it's because of and it might be true that you worked hard and you got ahead, but there's no recognition of what you're never doing it by yourself. you're always using acquired knowledge. You're always relying on society. In fact, the pandemic should have drove that point home. I mean, when they declared all these people essential workers all of a sudden, who everybody usually just looks down on, the people stocking shelves and driving, and working in a store. Suddenly they were declared essential because they are. The economy can't function without people doing the work, and the work isn't necessarily glamorous. It isn't surgery, right, or something glamorous, but it requires work to function. So it's hard to do within a capitalist society is drive home the idea that we're dependent on each other, that that work is important, that everybody's work is valuable, and not just somebody who's doing something that's like surgery or something like that that's more glamorous. I don't know. It's a difficult problem because I know in just to take the example of Ecuador again, they're given all kinds of under Correa, all kinds of scholarships for people to go study at the best universities, often win scholarships, go study in Europe, wherever, because he wants people to develop this professional, competent class that can help Ecuador develop. But what so often happens is a lot of these people come back and they become right wing. So you end up kind of subsidizing the right wing. So I don't know what the answer to that is. It's not easy.
Joe, is that why is that why the one thing Cuba exports is, doctors helping out, people in the most destitute of, situations, as opposed to like exporting, I don't know, all the small time business owners or something like that, just out of curiosity.
Well, Cuba has control of its information system, right? So yeah, you make an excellent point. I mean, Cuba has built a professional class and it seems to have values that are very different from the professionals elsewhere in the world. But I think it's crucial that they have control of their own media system. It's not a capitalist system. So that's the key difference. So it's very hard within constraints of capitalism to do something like that. It's very difficult. So you can elect a left-wing government, but if you still have a capitalist system, it's very hard to overcome all those obstacles.
But when it comes to decolonizing the mind and political education, as people say, that also, yeah. I mean, how do we try to advance that? Because and I do think we do need much more like critical Marxist education, so forth. I'm personally of the opinion that we also that the left, especially the Western left, needs to really get over its anti-communism. Like, I also think like anti-communist leftism, like, okay, I get it. It's like I get it. Joe Stalin was no angel, and and stuff, but like I just find like it's just self-McCarthyism what like the Western left does when they engage in anti-communist leftism. And like, I'm not saying that we completely that we don't acknowledge some of the bad stuff that happened in any communist stuff, but this whole thing of just completely throwing out what happened in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe, and not even acknowledging that so much of it fell apart because of Western color revolutions and because of the type of BS myths that we bought into, the whole double genocide theory and so forth, and the fact that so many left-leaning people bought into the propaganda of all of those goes back expat communities whose civil societies were founded by runaway Nazi war criminals. Like, I don't know, I'm curious your response on that, because when it comes to political education, there still is going to be like a lot of like even fights that we're going to be having with fellow leftists, some who are still committed to anti-communist leftism, and others who might be more open-minded, but then they'll have an analysis like China is a rival capitalist, rival imperialist, rival settler colonial country, ergo, hey, I may not like my capitalist country, but I'm going to side with them when it comes to the pivot to Asia and all that stuff.
Let me jump there. I believe that the work that the US did in Latin America, and I believe that all over the world, with anti-communism was amazing. I mean,
Oh
they
yes, my hat's
rooted
off to
the
them on the
anti-communist seed everywhere. And that explains why you have people that do not have anything. I'm talking about properties, wealth, and they are hardcore anti-communists. And they believe that the communists are going to take the pair of shoes that he wears, and leave him only one shoe because the other one needs to be shared with others. So those things exist, and they are very rooted. Even in Venezuela, and I believe that in Cuba also, countries, I mean, that we have, make changes to try to get rid of that, but those things are there. And that takes me to what Joe was mentioning a few minutes ago about the issue of the middle class and how you deal with so-called middle class, how they did with that problem in Ecuador, and many analysts say that something similar happened to Chavez, that because of the bonanza, the oil bonanza, and a lot of income and social programs, and that were launched by Chavez government. A lot of people went out of poverty, and they instead of supporting Chavismo, ended up joining right-wing forces. So those things are always there, but I believe that to counter that, you need to do better communication work, media work. You need to work harder on education values, as also Joe was mentioning before, and but you are never going to get rid of that. What I'm trying to tell you is that those things are gonna be there because the gringo did an amazing job to put that seed very deep there, and you have the imperialist machine still promoting those values, and even in countries that try to reject those values, that propaganda, as was mentioned before, enter in different ways. Not only in, I mean, we're talking about cultural, tools that are used by imperialism to try to reject anything that might jeopardize the ruling. So that's basically it, I think.
No, because Joe, I followed your work. Back when you had something at Telesort, and later you became a regular contributor to Fairness and Accuracy Reporting, which is one of the great leading media critic organizations in in the United States. But I have noticed something about some of the people who used to contribute to Fair, Ben Norton, Rania Khalek, but even yourself, when I notice sometimes you arguing with folks on on media, that I think because you three are also NGO critics, and also because you three don't just don't just begin. The root of all evil is corporate media. Although it's very important that we counter corporate media, and I think one day even eradicate corporate media and Western state media, and have it really in the hands of workers and so forth. But I have noticed that I believe you, Ben Norton, and Rania Khalek, I think it's safe to say that you guys have moved beyond the whole anti-communist leftism. And because of your works like debunking, NGOs, and also showing the contradictions with other state media apparatus that advocated imperialism. I mean, that was what Rania, did with Al Jazeera, and Ben often does that and so forth. So is it safe to say that there also needs to be we need to have more NGO critics, as well as also moving beyond the whole anti-communist leftism and anti-communist leftism?
Yeah, the anti-communist leftism is a huge problem. I don't know if you just look into things more and you realize how much people have been promoted. There's a great book. I promoted it online. Forget the last name, Stoner, about the cultural Cold War. It's a really good book because it talks about how the CIA they threw money in the 50s and right after the Second World War, when the CIA was created, they threw all sorts of money all over the world at promoting an anti-communist left to make sure those people had to step up on every other kind of leftist, right? So that's a huge thing. That's a huge problem. And I was part of it. I was part of the anti-communist left for many decades. It's in a way it gives me hope because I think people you have to learn, as you go develop it's a process, right? We all go learning. We have to learn, we have to investigate and then try to spread the word to others. So a lot of what I try to do now is like, why did I buy into this? And a lot of it's because you have certain leading lights in the left that become prominent, and then you accept like Chomsky, like others, and I think Syria was kind of a changing point for me because that's where I first in Libya around 2011 was saying, man, what Chomsky's saying here just doesn't make sense to me at all. I just don't. And then and from there you start unraveling more and more, and then but you always have to be critical. There's other like, there's Michael Parenti, there's Domenico Lasur, those other great writers who rebut that thing, but you always have to be critical at the same time because you don't want to fall into another trap of putting somebody else too high on a pedestal either. So, but it's a process. That's all I can say. You just have to keep learning and sometimes unlearn.
That's important. And that's important also because I just wanted to say that is important, that approach to understand that the people's thoughts evolve, and if you understand that, you try to avoid being so dogmatic, because when you attack everything at the same time, you might, instead of helping the cause, you might be pushing away people that might eventually become an ally. So it's complex because sometimes you feel that those different groupings that are out there are playing imperialist narratives, but at the same time you have to be careful not to push them away.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and actually, and it's funny what Joe said about Noam Chomsky, because I too was that anti-communist leftist. I can never like acknowledge any good things that Eastern European countries or that the Soviet Union might have done. Bought into the whole thing that like the Soviet Union was a rival mobster to like the to the U.S. But that is why it is important that that's okay. If people are going to be reading like Noam Chomsky, get deeper into Ed Herman or reading, Michael, read Michael Parenti, compare and contrast. But also, I think that's also why I think it's also vital to become an NGO critic, because many leftists also, people who don't like, watch, corporate media, if they turn on, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, or they'll watch left-leaning outlets like a Vice or an Al Jazeera, which purposely targets left-leaning people, and then they start to have very bizarre views on Syria or supporting the new Cold War, against Russia, and propping up like, a Navalny here or a Liu Xiaobo here in China and so forth. I think that's also why we need, much more, NGO critics to go along with critics of corporate media and so forth, because otherwise, we're always going to have, this problem of Haiti never being allowed to breathe, Cuba not being allowed to breathe, or what we see in any Latin American country or any country where the moment imperialism reigns its ugly heads, now it's like all hands on deck. Like they'll use every single thing within like their evil orbit to make sure that like they can convert left-leaning people to, support their reactionary thing. And I also think that leftists also need to, stop reading George Orwell, read somebody else.
Yeah,
Or else got a
sure.
lot of skeletons in his closet which
Yes,
need
yes,
exposing.
yes. Actually, people need to. But I believe that the left needs to step up its propaganda mechanisms. Propaganda is not a bad word; it's just a word. So everybody has to do that. Like corporate media is actually right-wing media, and everything that you have. So most media is right-wing. So left has to step up its media game. It has to step up its, not just written media, print media, but also social media, because that's very big now. And I think that we have to do better in media using technology, because those are the things that will be used to target young people. Those are up and coming things, so young people will be targeted with that. So we have to think of new ways. And I think this is what everybody has been mentioning, that you need better information war. It has to be balanced. So yeah, this is what we say, that this is what we are trying to do all the time. And it's a very unequal battle, but there is no way that it can be stopped, because the moment you stop, the whole place will be like taken over. The whole area will be taken over by the right wing, corporate media, etc. So we have to, what we have to really, what people has to realize, everybody of us, is that corporate media is not independent. That's very important that we realize it. And that state media is not, and state media is not essentially bad media. So these ideas are very deep rooted. So this has to be get rid of. And you're talking about the anti-communist left. I think it's more common in the West, and this West sphere of influence, where Western, all the world is under Western sphere of influence, but there are regions that are more under the Western sphere of influence, Latin America being the place. Whereas, in the countries of Asia and Africa, they had a lot of help in their independence movements from USSR. So they're not really the first one to start criticizing the Soviet Union. Most leftists, at least in Africa and Asia, most, I'm not saying all, but most, would actually, they do actually consider Joseph Stalin a hero. Not only because of the Second World War, but also because what happened later. Because the countries of these areas actually gained their independence, not only by inspiration from the Soviet Union, which was there, but also from their help. And after they got independence, they actually got aid from the same place. So why would they criticize, right? So I think experience shapes us. So it's very important that we have experience, we have information, and we have historical memory.
I think we can almost try to wrap up the conversation. I know I can talk to you guys for hours, but unfortunately, our audience, we can get millions of people to watch the Joe Rogan Experience, but we can't get people to
the algorithm won't help us.
Experience, but Joe, any closing? Closing thoughts. Any closing thoughts?
I think Sahil is right. We have to find ways to step up our game, and it varies from country to country. Every country is different. It's got different issues. I talked just one very specific thing. I mentioned a guy I talked to, an analyst I respect a lot in Ecuador, and I said, why couldn't we crack the 48% in Ecuador? And he said, we really weren't existent on TikTok, and I wouldn't know that because I'm not on TikTok ever. I never go on TikTok. I just don't have time to check out all these platforms. But what he told me was we really weren't there. Like we were non-existent on TikTok. I'm saying, really? Why was that? And he blamed it on the coordinator of the campaign, who was actually now kind of defected from Correismo. So she was kind of promoting herself on the platform rather than they say we really didn't do the work on TikTok that we needed to do. It's crucial in a country with a young population. So every country has its own challenges, so it can be something very specific, or in my opinion, my latest thing I'm on is that we're not building a political party that's in Canada, the United States. They keep going, like Jesus says, over and over again, trying to reform the Democrats or reform these imperialist parties that are unreformable, and they keep doing that decade after decade and not getting anywhere. And we have, so it's, yeah, so that every country has its challenges. Every country has its challenges, and you have to figure out what works in your context, what you're missing. It's not, I don't think it's a one size fits all, but it's the general point is, yeah, we need to step up our propaganda efforts, if you want to call it, put it that way, fine. That's what we need to do. And it varies from place to place.
Very quickly, when it comes to Canada, which the third major party is the NDP, are you one of those people who believes that we need to make a new left party and stop trying to...
definitely. Yeah. I mean, the Gaza genocide should be in my opinion, a huge teachable moment to show everybody, look, all these parties are pro-genocide. They package it differently, but they're all basically pro-genocide parties, and we need to trash can them all and start something new, definitely.
Okay. Well then, one of these days, Joe, I'm going to have you, debate Barry Weisletter of the NDP Socialist Caucus and Socialist Action Canada, because there are still leftists who. Anyways, we'll have that debate also in the future, along with our cryptocurrency one with Jared Ball and hopefully Graham Elwood. Jesus. Happy 5-year birthday. Any closing thoughts?
I believe that relates to the 5 years anniversary of Orinoco Tribune, what we have been talking about, and how hard it is to keep a project like this one, especially because you don't find enough support, and that's sad. And you see that other projects similar to us are decaying also. And the only explanation that I found there is that people needs to eat. And if people don't get financial support to make a project like the one that we try to do in Orinoco Tribune happen, at least to run a little bit smoothly, people abandon the project. And I mean, in these 5 years, I've seen several cases of things like that, and that's sad. For example, just to talk about something that is very directed to us, I mean, you see Causachung News that is directed by two great guys, Camila Escalante and Oli Vargas, and they has been, when you check their website, that we try to check them regularly because their content was great. I have noticed at least that their content has been reduced a lot in recent months, and that says something. It says that maybe they need to eat because the project is not giving them enough revenues to keep pushing that. So I believe that the invitation is to try to support projects that you find necessary, because I mean, if there's no financial support, I mean, we will eventually die. Our strength in Orinoco Tribune is that we are based on a big group of volunteers that make the financial harsh of the lack of funding manageable. But eventually, I mean, Saheli is one of those volunteers, and we have like 10 more like Saheli working with us in Orinoco Tribune on a volunteer basis. But eventually, especially because of the economic conditions getting worse in the north, they might eventually think that they need to leave us because they need to eat also. And we cannot pay them something to try to keep them, with us. So it's complicated, but I believe that it's extremely important to raise consciousness about that. I mean, because you can read the content of Orinoco Tribune, you say, wow, nice, it's good, or it's too bad, or whatever. But you have to notice that there is a lot of work behind that. and that work needs to be retributed the same way you might retribute a good outlet in the north, because I also believe, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm too biased, but I believe that there is a racial bias, behind people in the north supporting, projects from white people in the north instead of supporting projects from people in the south like us. So maybe that's not only that's not the whole problem, but I believe that there's something about that there. So anyway, I can talk like for years about this, but I believe that's important to highlight that we need support, including you, Youri. I mean, you are part of the same scene. Your audio is not. I cannot hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now, yes,
Okay.
now I hear you.
Perfect. No, my friend Boyan, of the Barricade also has like that exact same problem of many people say, hey, we like your content, we want we want the channel to grow, but it's like, yeah, guys, but you need to donate. Like, I mean, that's the only way you avoid left outlets falling prey to wealthy donors, like a Pierre Omidyar or one of those people, and then people go, well, I'm not going to support you guys because now like you're a show for big corporations. But if people themselves don't invest in independent media, which is as important as mobilizing the masses or the working class, then yeah, then we're not going, then we're always going to have, this issue of people going, I can't believe I fell for the next propaganda lie. So, Saheli, as we're at, as we wrap up, any closing thoughts?
Never imagined that closing thoughts will fall on me. But anyway, I think I already made my point that we need to step up our propaganda game. But I think I'll just repeat what Jesus said in a different way, maybe. That yes, when anybody reads any of, not just our content from any independent media from anywhere in the world, they should know that there has been a lot of effort behind it, not only just to prepare the news but also to get the information, etc. For example, and we have been planning for a long time to go into the streets and to ask people about some hot potato topic, so that is the sort of thing, or maybe go to places where something is happening which also relates to our work, or what we do at Orinoco Tribune, and we want to attend maybe some gathering of anti-imperialists, for example, or a gathering of anti-imperialist groups or other social movements. We do not ever have the money to do that, okay? Because, to travel to somewhere, you need a lot of money because flight prices are killer. But when you cannot even have enough money to keep up your domain, how are you going to imagine those things? And that is why actually you will always see that mainstream media has all the best photos, because they are always at the place, they have the money. So we do not. And that's a big problem. I'm not just talking about people getting remunerated for their work, but also having the ability, the financial ability to be able to be at the right place at the right time, or to be at places where nobody reaches. So we need many things, like we need equipment, not just us. I mean, we need definitely, but there are many outlets who definitely need some equipment, who need money to keep their, even if it's an online outlet, you are not going to print anything, so you don't need that money, but you need to pay your domain. You need the internet, and that costs. Okay, I mean, in our case, it's mostly internet. So when it's happening, like when you have these things, when you have to do these things, and it comes from the donations you have, and that reduces, because after COVID, Orinoco Tribune's donations has reduced by half, more than half. So it's a very bad situation. And we understand that people need to eat. So those who donate, yes, they are also in hardship. So I think that we also need to, use social media to have greater reach. And we are also always asking our friends in other media to just do some advertisement for us, in the sense that we publish our work, because that is the exact thing we do. When we see something nice from many
I was about to mention that we need more solidarity even among
us,
progressive.
Yes.
I mean,
even among
you don't see it.
independent media, yes.
You see competition among left projects out there, and that's sad. That's sad.
Yeah, we need more cooperation than competition. So we actually do it. This we see some things, a very good analysis or very good news or something very to the point topic that someone has published. We try to republish it as a matter of solidarity, and we expect the same, from others, which we rarely experience. I mean,
Doesn't
I think
happen.
monthly review publishes a lot of things from Orinoco Tribune, but I think maybe there are
Yes.
only 2 or 3 like that. So we need more solidarity even among ourselves.
No, I completely agree with you. I won't get too much into some of the problems. I have found myself in the whole left leaning world as trying to build up 1+1. But a lot of what both you and Jesus said, I can vouch 1+1 has the exact same problem when it comes to just trying to build a channel and so forth. And you three are great guests because y'all do share, the interviews with some others. Anywho, not going to name names because we want them to come back on the program, but there does need to be, there does need to be way more solidarity, way more cooperation on the left on so many things, and we shouldn't even be seeing, ourselves as competitors. Like when we all want, a health. When we all want a world where we don't have this ghastly system of capitalism and end to imperialism and whatnot, and that includes Palestine, and ends all these injustices, and you need independent media for that, because that is just as important as organizing the marches, the demonstrations, and lobbying and whatnot. So, no, completely agree. And
Absolutely.
on that note, folks, do donate generously to Orinoco Tribune. And to my fellow middle class folks, if you can afford the Netflix and you can afford Spotify, you can afford to be a regular Patreon to Orinoco Tribune.
If you can afford a frappuccino, you can afford 1 monthly donation to Orinoco Tribune of $5.
And Joe, plug yourself. Where can people follow your work apart from ZNet and Fairnessnocracy?
I write for Substack now. I find it easier just to write for Substack. Yeah.
Okay. And actually, for people who are completely alien to Substack, how can they support you financially if they follow you on Substack?
I'm not worried about being. For Substack has its own way to support. If you want to be a paid subscriber, you can make it though. It's a nice thing about Substack. It's all built in. So for as long as it lasts, eventually, there's all kinds of pressures on people. They're always trying to cut ways for anyone to get funding. Like, I'm fortunate that I have a full-time job. It limits how much I can write, but because it has nothing to do with politics. But on the flip side, I'm not, like, if people want to donate, that's fine. But I'm not, I'd prefer they donate to Orinoco Tribune or somebody else. But if they want to donate to me, I'm fine. Not going to turn them down. But I'm not worried about it.
Fantastic. And I've recently done a link tree, and apparently I don't need to and apparently looking at Danny Haifeng's link tree can actually get people to donate via Patreon. So just going to let people know, I am getting, I'm working on making sure that people can start doing the donation scheme for 1+1. Working on that right now, and I'm glad I don't have to do like a blog and a website in order to do that. So I'm just going to put that on Linktree, but that still is a work in progress. Until then, we were joined on this edition of special 1+1 edition and a crossover episode with Orinoco Tribune. We were joined by Saheli Chowdhury, part of the editorial team of Orinoco Tribune, Jesus Rodriguez Espinoza, the editor-in-chief of Orinoco Tribune, and the brilliant,
that sounds fancy,
truth-teller, myth-buster, media critic, NGO critic, union activist, anti-imperialist, and he does not subscribe to anti-communist leftism, brilliant Joe Emersberger, whose work you can follow at Fair, his own Substack. I'll make sure to put that link in the in the YouTube page. Comrades, thank you so much for this, and happy and yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Until then, and thank you so much for coming here today.
Un
Thanks a
abrazo.
lot,
Nice to
Youri.
see you, Joe, by the
Bye,
way.
Jesus. Bye, Saheli. Take care. Bye-bye.
Please be safe. Un abrazo, Youri. To you too. Have fun.
Bye. Thanks for doing this, Youri.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
You did not stop recording. You have to stop recording. Huh?
Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3.